Reed adjusted the light settings on his helmet as he floated through the dark corridors of the ancient space station. Dust particles danced in the beam of his headlight, undisturbed for thousands of years until this moment. As the lead archaeologist of the Galactic Historical Society, he had explored hundreds of abandoned stations, but something about this one felt different. "Base, are you getting these readings?" Reed spoke into his comm unit, his four-fingered hand steady as he held up his scanner. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our database." "Confirmed. Lead Explorer Reed," the base controller replied. The patterns match some of the mythological texts in the ancient archive. Reed's heart beat faster. The ancient archive, a collection of stories that most modern scholars dismissed as pure fiction. Tales of a species called humans who had supposedly achieved incredible feats of science and warfare. But no evidence of their existence had ever been found, leading most to classify them alongside other mythical creatures. The station's architecture was strange. The corridors were perfectly sized for beings much larger than Reed's species, with oddly shaped doorways and control panels that seemed designed for hands with 5 fingers instead of 4. Everything matched the descriptions in the ancient texts, down to the peculiar rectangular doorways. As Reed turned a corner, his light beam fell on a massive door covered in unfamiliar symbols. He approached carefully, his scanner working to decode the ancient writing. Slowly, the symbols began to make sense through his universal translator. CRO storage facility. Authorized PRSONNL, onloy. Lillearn Aing. 10,000 OQPNTs in stasis. Projexit AARK. Humanity's last hope. Base, are you seeing this? Reed's voice trembled with excitement. The language matches the ancient human texts perfectly. He pressed his hand against the control panel, not expecting anything to happen. To his shock, lights suddenly flickered to life along the corridor. A soft hum filled the air as ancient machinery awakened from its long slumber. "Power systems at 15% and rising," the base controller reported, amazement clear in their voice. "Reed, this technology shouldn't still be working after all this time. It's impossible." But Reed barely heard them. The massive door was slowly sliding open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. As emergency lights sputtered to life inside, his jaw dropped at the sight before him. Rows upon rows of metallic pods stretched into the distance, each one large enough to hold a being much bigger than himself. The pods were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, their surfaces covered in frost, but otherwise remarkably preserved. Status lights blinked steadily on each unit, showing active power after thousands of years. Reed approached the nearest pod, wiping away the frost with his sleeve. Through the clear panel, he could see a face. The being inside was exactly as described in the ancient texts. 2 eyes, a single mouth, smooth skin, and most notably, 5 fingers on each hand. It was a human, perfectly preserved in cryogenic sleep. "Base," Reed whispered, his voice filled with awe. "We need to assemble the full research team immediately. Every story, every legend, every myth about humans. They're all real, and there are 10,000 of them here, just waiting to wake up." As Reed stood there, staring at the sleeping human, he couldn't help but remember all the ancient warnings about this species, their incredible adaptability, their unmatched military prowess, their tendency to overcome impossible odds. If the legends about their abilities were true as well, the implications were staggering. This discovery wouldn't just rewrite history, it might reshape the entire future of the galaxy. As Reed began documenting his findings, he wondered if his people were ready for what they might be awakening. Behind him, the status light on one of the pods changed from steady green to flashing yellow. The awakening had already begun. 3 days after Reed's discovery, the ancient space station hummed with activity. Dozens of scientists and researchers moved through its corridors, their equipment floating alongside them in the low gravity. In the main Cryo chamber, Dr. Val, the leading expert in ancient technology, studied the control panel with growing excitement. "These systems are far more advanced than anything we've ever seen," she said, her tail twitching with enthusiasm as she worked. "Even after thousands of years, the backup power systems are still running at 60% efficiency." Reed floated nearby, recording everything with his datapad. The initial shock of his discovery had given way to careful scientific curiosity. "What about the life signs?" he asked. Val pointed to the readings on her screen. "Strong and steady in most pods. We've identified 9,847 viable subjects. The rest." She gestured to a section of pods with dark status lights. "The rest didn't make it through the long sleep." The research team had spent days debating what to do next. Some wanted to wake all the humans immediately. Others, remembering the ancient warnings about human military might, argued for more caution. "Team leaders, please come to the main control room," Base Command announced over the comm system. "The Council has made their decision." Reed and Val made their way to the control room, where Director Thorne waited with several other senior researchers. The director's face was serious as they gathered around the central display. "The Council has reviewed all our findings," Director Thorne began. "They've authorized us to wake 3 humans as a test group. We'll assess them before making any decisions about the others." Reed spoke up. "Director, the ancient texts warn that humans are most dangerous when they feel threatened. Shouldn't we wake more than 3? They might feel vulnerable in such small numbers." "The texts also say humans are reasonable beings who understand scientific caution," Val countered. 3 is a good number for initial contact." Director Thorne nodded. "We've chosen 3 pods near each other. According to the computer, they contain humans with different skills: a military commander, a scientist, and an engineer. This will give us a good understanding of their species." The team moved quickly after that. They prepared a reception area with appropriate gravity settings based on the ancient specifications. Medical teams stood by with equipment modified for human biology. Security teams watched from a safe distance, though their weapons were set to stun only. "Beginning revival sequence for Pod A137, Val announced, her fingers moving carefully over the control panel. The pod's frost coating began to melt as internal lights changed from green to blue. Reed watched the pod's occupant through the clearing window. The human inside was larger than he had expected, with short gray hair and a strong face. According to the pod's data, this was the military commander. Pod B138 and C139 beginning revival, another technician reported. These pods contained the scientist and engineer. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then Pod A137's status changed to revival complete, and the front panel began to open with a soft hiss. The human's eyes opened slowly, blinking in the light. Everyone in the room held their breath. This was the moment that would prove whether humans were really as remarkable as the legends claimed. The commander sat up slowly, looking around the room with alert eyes that showed no fear, only careful assessment of the situation. When he spoke, the universal translators took a moment to process his words. "Well," he said calmly, "looks like we overslept a bit." In the other pods, the scientist and engineer were beginning to wake as well. As Reed watched their remarkably calm reactions, he realized that the legends had missed something important about humans. Yes, they were supposedly great warriors and brilliant inventors, but their most impressive quality might be their ability to adapt to any situation, even waking up thousands of years in the future surrounded by aliens. The real test of humanity was about to begin. The 3 humans sat around a large table in the station's meeting room, drinking water and eating the nutrient paste that their pods had preserved for them. The military commander had introduced himself as James, the scientist as Alice, and the engineer as Tom. They seemed surprisingly calm for people who had just learned they'd been asleep for 15,000 years. Reed couldn't stop staring at them. Everything about them matched the ancient texts perfectly. Their height, their 5-fingered hands, their way of moving in the artificial gravity. But it was their eyes that fascinated him most. Those eyes seemed to take in everything, analyze it, and understand it almost instantly. "So," James said, setting down his water container, "you thought we were myths." Director Thorne nodded, his four-fingered hands folded carefully on the table. "All evidence of your species disappeared thousands of years ago. Only stories remained, and they seemed impossible." "What kind of stories?" Alice asked, leaning forward with interest. Her long hair floated slightly in the low gravity, despite her attempts to keep it tied back. Reed activated his datapad. "The texts speak of humans fighting off invasions from species far more advanced than themselves. They talk about your people crossing vast distances of space with primitive technology, surviving on worlds that should have killed you instantly. Some stories claim humans could learn to use any alien technology just by looking at it." Tom laughed. "Well, that last part's a bit exaggerated. We usually need to take things apart at least once before we figure them out." He was already holding a piece of alien technology he'd been given, turning it over in his hands with obvious curiosity. "Why did you go into cryo sleep?" Val asked, her tail twitching with scientific curiosity. "Our records from that time are very incomplete." The three humans exchanged glances. Finally, James spoke. "We were losing a war. A bad one. The enemy called themselves the Destroyers. They didn't want to conquer or rule. They just wanted to wipe out all advanced life in the galaxy." A heavy silence fell over the room. Reed noticed how the humans' bodies had tensed slightly, their casual manner giving way to something harder. "We fought them for decades," James continued. "Lost Earth, our home world, lost most of our colonies, but we managed to bloody them badly enough that they had to stop and rebuild their forces. That's when we came up with Project Ark." Alice picked up the story. "We built hidden stations like this one all across the galaxy, stored our best soldiers, scientists, and engineers in cryo sleep. The plan was to wake up after the destroyers had moved on, help rebuild civilization, and be ready if they ever came back. And now it's been 15,000 years," Tom added quietly. "Did they ever return?" Director Thorne shook his head. "We've never encountered any species matching your description of the destroyers. But our exploration of the galaxy is still limited." "Limited?" James asked sharply. "How much of the galaxy have you explored?" "About 15% of our spiral arm," Val answered. The humans exchanged another look, this one filled with concern. "They're still out there," James said firmly. "The destroyers would never just give up and die. They're probably in hibernation too, waiting to strike again when the galaxy is full of life again." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. "Should we wake the others in the cryopods?" "Not yet," James replied. "First, we need to check something. Tom, how long would it take you to get this station's long-range sensors working?" Tom grinned, already standing up. "Give me an hour with them. If they're anything like our old systems, I can boost their range by at least 300%. The humans were moving with purpose now, their earlier relaxed manner completely gone. Reed realized he was watching the transformation that the ancient texts had described, the moment when humans switched from peaceful explorers to determined warriors. The legends, it seemed, were about to come alive. Tom's work on the station's sensors took exactly 53 minutes. Reed watched in amazement as the human engineer's hands moved confidently over the alien technology, making changes and improvements that should have been impossible for someone who had just woken up from a 15,000-year sleep. "There," Tom said, stepping back from the control panel. "That should give us a much better view of what's out there." The main screen lit up, showing a vastly expanded view of the surrounding space. Alice studied the readings carefully. "The basic structure of the galaxy hasn't changed much." "That's good. It means our old navigation data might still be useful." James stood at the center of the control room, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Start the scan pattern we used to track destroyer movements. Focus on the areas they used for hibernation." Reed looked at Director Thorne, who nodded permission. Val input the commands, following Tom's instructions carefully. "While we wait for the scan results, Reed said, "Could you tell us more about these destroyers? Our people need to understand what we might be facing." James's face grew dark. Imagine a species that sees all other intelligent life as a disease that needs to be cured. They believed they were the only ones worthy of existing in this galaxy. Their ships were like nothing we'd ever seen. Massive constructs that could tear apart whole planets. "But you fought them," Val said, her tail completely still now, a sign of intense focus among her people. "We did more than fight them," Alice added. "We hurt them." Humanity was the first species they encountered that could truly fight back. We were smaller, our technology was less advanced, but we had something they didn't expect. "What was that?" Reed asked. "Creativity," Tom answered, still working at his console. "The destroyers were powerful but predictable. Humans, well, we're good at thinking outside the box, finding new ways to use technology, turning weaknesses into strengths." The sensor console suddenly beeped. Everyone turned to look at the main screen. "No," James whispered, his face going pale. "Show me the energy readings from Sector 7. Tom quickly brought up the data. The screen filled with complex patterns that Reed couldn't understand, but the humans clearly could. All three of them had gone very quiet. "It's them, isn't it?" Director Thorne asked. Alice nodded slowly. "Those energy patterns match destroyer hibernation signatures exactly. They're out there, just like we feared. And based on these readings, they're starting to wake up." "How many?" Reed asked, dreading the answer. "At least 3 of their world killer ships," Tom said, his voice grim. "Probably more that we can't detect yet. They're in the perfect position to strike at the heart of your civilization." James turned to Director Thorne. "You need to contact your council immediately. Tell them everything we've told you about the destroyers. And then," he paused, looking at the other humans, who nodded their agreement, "then tell them we need to wake up our soldiers." "All of them?" Director Thorne asked. "All of them," James confirmed. "The people in those pods are humanity's best warriors and brightest minds. We went to sleep prepared for this exact moment. Each one of us studied the destroyers, learned their weaknesses, trained to fight them." Reed looked at the thousands of cryopods visible through the control room's window. "The ancient texts say that a single human soldier could turn the tide of a battle. Are those stories true?" "Those stories," Alice said with a small smile, "weren't even close to what we can really do. The destroyers thought they had wiped us out, but instead they gave us 15,000 years to rest and prepare. Now it's time to show them their biggest mistake, leaving any humans alive at all." As if responding to her words, more alerts began sounding from the sensor station. The destroyers were waking up faster now. The real war was about to begin. The space station's emergency alarms blared as Reed rushed through the corridors. In just 2 days, everything had changed. The council had spent hours debating whether to trust the humans' warnings, until the long-range sensors picked up something massive entering the edge of their space. "Status report," Director Thorne called out as Reed entered the control room. "The unknown ship has destroyed our outer warning beacons," Val reported, her tail rigid with fear. "It's exactly as the humans described. A destroyer scout ship." On the main screen, they watched as a massive dark shape moved through space. The ship was unlike anything their civilization had ever seen. It looked like a giant black crystal, its surface covered in weapons that made their most powerful warships look like toys. James stood at the command station, looking grimly at the display. "That's one of their smaller vessels," he said. "Just a scout, checking if this part of space has developed enough life to be worth cleansing." "Our fleet is moving to intercept," Director Thorne announced. 5 heavy cruisers, our best ships." "No," all 3 humans shouted at once. But it was too late. On the screen, 5 ships of the alien fleet approached the destroyer vessel. They looked impressive to Reed, the pride of their civilization's military might. The destroyer ship fired once. Just once. 2 cruisers simply disappeared. 2 more spun away, crippled. The fifth managed to retreat, its hull smoking from just being close to the weapon's energy. "Now do you understand?" James asked quietly. "This is what we fought for decades, and this is just a scout ship. The world killers are 100 times larger." The control room was silent except for the continued blare of alarms. Reed watched as the director's face changed from shock to determination. "Wake them," Director Thorne ordered. "Wake them all." The next few hours were a blur of activity. The cryopods activated in sequence, releasing their occupants. Hundreds of humans filled the station's corridors. Reed watched in amazement as they moved with purpose and discipline, immediately organizing themselves into combat units and technical teams. "The scout ship will report back soon," Tom said, working with a team of human engineers to modify the station's defensive systems. "Then the main fleet will come." "Can we really fight something like that?" Val asked, still shaken by how easily their ships have been destroyed. Alice smiled grimly. "Watch this," she said, bringing up a new display. "That scout ship is using the same technology they used in our war. Technology we spent years learning to counter." On another screen, James coordinated with the newly awakened human soldiers. Their movements were precise, their eyes sharp and ready. These weren't just warriors. They were veterans of humanity's greatest war, preserved at the height of their abilities. "Their weapons are powerful," James explained to the alien leaders, "but they have weaknesses. Their crystal ships can be cracked if you hit them in the right places. Their energy weapons follow predictable patterns. And most importantly, they've never adapted or improved. They just keep using the same strategies that almost worked against us last time." "Almost worked?" Reed asked. "They nearly wiped us out," James agreed, "but nearly isn't good enough. While they slept, thinking they'd won, we were waiting, planning. And now," he looked around at the hundreds of awakened humans, each one a veteran of the ancient war. "Now we're rested, we're ready, and we're really angry about what they did to Earth." The station shook slightly as human engineers activated long-dormant defense systems. Reed watched in amazement as ancient weapon ports opened along the station's hull, revealing technology far beyond their current understanding. "The real question," James said with a grim smile, "isn't whether we can fight them. It's whether they're ready to face humanity again." In the distance, more destroyer ships began to appear on the sensors. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin again. The space station had transformed in just 24 hours. What was once a quiet archaeological site now hummed with military activity. 9,000 human soldiers moved with purpose through the corridors, preparing for the battle that was coming. Reed watched in amazement as Tom led a team of human engineers in modifying the alien fleet's ships. They worked with incredible speed, installing new weapons and defensive systems that had been stored in hidden compartments throughout the station. "How are they doing this?" Val asked, her tail twitching in excitement as she watched the humans work. "They're improving our technology like they've known it for years. Humans are good at working with what we have," Alice explained while studying sensor data. "We spent years preparing for this moment. Every person in those pods was chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to adapt and improvise." James stood at the main tactical display, surrounded by both human and alien military leaders. The screen showed the approaching destroyer fleet, 15 massive ships now, including 2 of the dreaded world killers. "Their formation hasn't changed in 15,000 years, James said, pointing to the display. "They still think they're invincible. That's going to be their weakness." Reed looked at the tactical display with worry. "But they destroy our best ships in seconds. How can we fight something so powerful?" One of the newly awakened human soldiers stepped forward. He was carrying what looked like a simple metal sphere. "With these," he said, holding up the device, "we call it a phase bomb. The destroyers think their crystal ships are indestructible, but hit them with one of these in the right spot, and they shatter like glass." Tom finished, entering the control room. "We've modified your fleet's ships to carry them. The hard part will be getting close enough to use them." Director Thorne studied the tactical display. The destroyers will reach us in 6 hours. Are we ready? James nodded. As ready as we'll ever be. The station's defenses are at full power. The fleet has been upgraded. And, he smiled slightly, we've got a few surprises they won't be expecting. Through the station's windows, Reed could see the alien fleet gathering. Their ships looked different now, modified with human technology. Human soldiers worked alongside alien crews, teaching them new tactics and strategies. There's something I don't understand, Reed said. If you knew the destroyers might return, why hide in cryo sleep? Why not stay awake and build up your forces? Because we needed them to think they'd won. Alice explained. If they knew we survived, they would have never stopped hunting us. This way, they'd spent 15,000 years getting comfortable. They haven't evolved, haven't improved. But she gestured to the modified ships and weapons. We never stop learning, never stop adapting. Suddenly, the tactical display lit up with new warnings. The destroyer fleet had increased speed. They were coming in fast. They've detected our activity, James announced. They know we're here. He turned to Director Thorne. It's time to make the call. Are your people ready to fight alongside us? The director looked around the control room at the mix of humans and aliens working together. In just a few days, these mythical humans had given them hope against an enemy that would have otherwise destroyed them completely. We're ready, Director Thorne said firmly. The legends say humans never start fights, but they always finish them. Let's prove those legends true. James nodded and opened a channel to all ships. All units, battle stations, remember your training. We've waited 15,000 years for this chance. Let's show the destroyers why they should have made sure humanity was really gone. The first shots of the battle were moments away. The legends of humanity were about to become history once again. The battle began with a flash of light that lit up space like a new star being born. The destroyer fleet fired their main weapons, expecting to end the fight in seconds as they had done countless times before. But this time was different. Shields holding. Tom shouted from his station. The modifications are working. Reed watched in amazement as the combined human-alien fleet moved in perfect formation. The ships dodged and weaved in ways that should have been impossible for their size, using moves that the humans had taught them in just a few short days. First wave, attack pattern Delta. James commanded. Just like we practiced. A group of smaller ships shot forward, moving so fast they were almost impossible to track. The destroyers' massive weapons tried to target them, but couldn't keep up with their speed. As Reed watched, the small ships launched their phase bombs directly at the weak points the humans had identified. The result was spectacular. The first destroyer ship's crystal hull cracked like ice in spring, huge fragments spinning off into space. The mighty vessel that had seemed invincible just days ago split apart and went dark. It works. Val cried out, her tail practically tying itself in knots with excitement. The legends were true. Humans really do know how to defeat them. But the battle was far from over. The two world killer ships moved forward, their massive forms blocking out the stars. These were the ships that had destroyed Earth so long ago, and they were out for revenge. Now, James said quietly, show them our surprise. Alice pressed a sequence of buttons on her console. All around the station, hidden doors opened in space. Out of them flew thousands of small, fast ships, vessels that had been stored away with the humans, preserved for this very moment. Fighter squadrons, you are cleared to engage, James announced. Remember Earth. The human fighters swarmed around the world killers like angry bees, each one piloted by a veteran of the ancient war. They knew exactly where to strike, how to dodge the deadly energy beams, how to work together to bring down something 1,000 times their size. The battle raged for hours. Reed could hardly believe what he was seeing. The humans fought with a combination of careful planning and wild creativity that the destroyers couldn't match. When one tactic stopped working, they would instantly switch to another. When the destroyers adapted to their attacks, the humans would find new ways to hit them. Finally, the last world killer ship split apart, its crystal hull shattering into 1,000,000 pieces. The remaining destroyer vessels tried to retreat, but the humans had planned for this too. More ships appeared from hidden stations across the sector, cutting off their escape. "Surrender," James broadcast to the remaining destroyer ships. "This sector is under human protection now." For the first time in known history, the destroyers surrendered. Hours later, in the station's main hall, Reed watched as humans and aliens celebrated together. Director Thorne was speaking to the council, explaining how the myths about humanity had not only been true, but hadn't gone far enough. "You know what the best part is," Tom said, joining Reed by the window. "We've found more human cryo stations out there. Thousands more of us, waiting to wake up. The galaxy's about to get a lot more interesting. Aren't you worried about how everyone will react?" Reed asked, finding out that humanity is not only real but so powerful. Alice smiled. "We're not here to rule or conquer. We're here to protect, to build, to explore. That's what humanity has always been about. The destroyers never understood that. It's why they lost." James raised a glass in a toast. "To the future," he said. "To humans and aliens working together. And to legends becoming reality." Reed looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed in just a few days. The humans had gone from being myths to saviors, from legends to living heroes. And something told him this was just the beginning of humanity's return to the galaxy. After all, as the ancient texts had said, humans never stopped at just one miracle.